the port that is coming up in Galathea Bay, which is actually a nesting site for the leatherback turtle, giant leatherback turtle. These are strict no-go zones for any developmental activity. That's because the presence of coral reefs, the mangroves, nesting sites is one of the criteria. And your book points out that there have been at least 500 nesting incidents of leatherback turtles in the last 2-3 seasons from WII data. This data from the Wildlife Institute of India that your book quotes. How corals have just disappeared from Galathea Bay.
This is a serious problem with what is happening. Every single legal dimension, it is clear that there is a violation. 500 nestings that you're mentioning of the leatherbacks are happening every year for the last 3 or 4 years from the records of the WII and the Andaman and Nicobar Forest Department. In 2022, there were more than 600 leatherback nestings on the beach in Galathea. That the environmental clearance condition says that 16,000 coral colonies should be relocated. In the first instance means that these coral colonies exist in this place. And if coral colonies exist, it is automatically CRZ 1A as per Indian law, and a port cannot be allowed. The bay today, if you look at the map, has an opening of about 3 kilometers at its widest. So it is inside this bay that the port is going to be built, right? The mouth of the bay is going to be closed by a breakwater, which is 3 kilometers wide today. And this is what is being used by all these creatures that are living there, is going to be restricted to only 300 meters. The opening of the bay will come down by 90%. That is when it will stop being a CRZ1A, because then the bay will change ecological character completely. It is the construction of the port that will destroy this bay, destroy the ecological characteristics, and that is when it will become non-CRZ1A. But today it is clearly, there's no denying the fact, and it's extremely unfortunate that the NGT has completely ignored all the scientific evidence, which is there for everybody to see, and just said that everything that the government has said is okay, and there are serious procedural improprieties in how the NGT went about doing this as well.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Bookshook on the Wire. I'm Aathira Perinchery. Today we're going to be discussing a book that's sure to shake you when you read it. It's going to leave you wondering and worrying because it is about a slew of infrastructure projects that are proposed on the Great Nicobar Island, which is the southernmost island in the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago. Now, the projects that are coming up include an international transshipment terminal, a township, a power plant, an airport, and tourism facilities around this, all on this island, the Great Nicobar Island. And this is the book that discusses a lot of issues that have risen about these projects. It's called Island on Edge, the Great Nicobar Crisis, and it is edited by Pankaj Sekhsaria. Now, the book contains around 17 journalistic pieces about the impacts on people, on biodiversity, and a lot more. And to discuss this book with us today, we have Pankaj Sekhsaria. Pankaj, welcome to the show and thank you for being with us here.
Thank you, Aathira, for having me, and I'm very happy to be on this chat with you.
Thank you. And Pankaj has worked for more than 3 decades on issues related to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and he's written 7 books, the latest of which is this. But just before this, this comes as a sequel to another similar book, which also contains journalistic writings about the projects. That is called The Great Nicobar Betrayal. And Pankaj, my first question to you is what made you want to bring these together as 2 books because they're already there out there. These are pieces of journalism. So, what made you compile them together?
Right. I think that's a very interesting question on communication. But like you said in the introduction, Athira, the scale of this project, of the various components, and I'm sure we'll discuss this. But for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been, and when I say we, it's been me and a small group of other researchers. We've been following this project very carefully, and uh, a number of news outlets, including the Wire, has reported on this very extensively. Like you yourself have written very extensively, and you continue to write on various aspects of this project. So in about 2021, when the project was proposed and we started to look at it, I started writing. Other journalists got involved, and then the Frontline magazine did a couple of special issues. News outlets like The Wire, Hindu, all kinds of publications got involved. And about a year and a half after this whole thing started, I realized that there's a lot of material out there in the public domain, some very good research and investigation work by journalists and researchers, but it was all scattered. It's there, but it's all scattered. And I thought it might be very useful to kind of just bring it together, even if it is limited, if it is well curated and it gives a broad sense of the issues, then to bring it within the covers of a book allows for any reader or anybody interested easy access to some of the key dimensions of the particular project. And that is the same logic that we followed for the follow-up volume, which is Island on Edge. And what is actually quite striking, and in line of what you said, that the two volumes are only about a year and a half apart. But post the publication of the first volume, there has been so much interest, research, and writing in the media that I realized, and a few friends realized, that there is enough material, enough new material, enough and strikingly new material that we could do another volume. And this volume has come together very well and very nicely as well. So the idea has been to bring it together for an audience that wants to know more and does not have to go around looking at different places. And since I have been working in these islands for a while and I have a broad sense, I think it has helped to bring together that set of articles that tell the whole story in a comprehensive manner. So it has been a very exciting actually experience and hugely productive, because it has catalyzed, it has made a lot of things happen. And I do consider, and I do continue to be a great believer in books, because even if they are edited volumes, of course, other books, because books do something. I mean, and we are on a chat show on books, so I think books continue to have a huge amount of relevance. They uh, they reach out to people in ways that other forms of communication cannot reach out, and that is not to say that other forms of communication are not equally important or as good, but it is important that books play a very different and a very can play a very catalytic role, and we are seeing that in this case as well.
Right. And you're right, indeed, it has come together really well because the book captures a lot of aspects, whether it's the trees and the logging that and the questions arising around the, at least 1 million to 1 crore trees that are likely to be logged when this project begins across 130 square kilometers of forest land, whether it's the economic impacts, and the questions around whether this will actually be worth investing so much in, and a lot of things. So it captures all those issues pretty well. So apart from that, there have been questions about the projects being located in an area that's having a high level of seismic activity, around 44 earthquakes per year. And then you also have the impact on the biodiversity, on corals, on the people themselves. And we have two indigenous communities who live on the island, the Shompen and the Nicobaris. And the Shompen are a particularly vulnerable tribal group. So all these are part of the book. And I wanted to ask you, there have been, like you pointed out, there have been a lot of media articles about this, especially in the last 2 years or so. But would you say there is any aspect that has still been underestimated in terms of impact? And uh, what do you think there is, if any?
No, I think there is. You've put the whole thing very nicely together in terms of what are the key aspects, and I'm very glad you've asked this question, because I think there are many dimensions of this that are still not very clear, or we don't know. Uh, so, just I'll give you a couple of examples. One is the biodiversity that we are absolutely going to lose, the richness we are going to lose if this project comes up. And again, in line with what we were saying, there's so much new material. Uh, just in November of 2025, 2 months ago, science, there were discoveries of two big species, in that part from where the project is going to come. In Great Nicobar, one snake and one bird. So larger taxa, which are not very common to actually find as new species, and these one of them is now described as a new species. The bird is likely to be described as a new species. So we are sitting in a place that has barely been studied. And in the last 4 years, since the project proposal came out, a conservative estimate, and because this is just very preliminary work that's been done, uh, at least 40 to 45 new species of creatures have been described from the project area in Great Nicobar. This goes right from small insects to moths to geckos, crabs. So we, in spite of the lot of effort and focus on the biodiversity elements, I don't think we really even know about what is there in this island. So leave alone a documentation of what is going to be lost. That's very important. The other thing, and just by coincidence, just day before yesterday, I was talking to a researcher who works on water. Now, what is the availability of fresh water on this island? Uh, how will the project needs? Now, you have a massive, like you said, 130 to 160 square kilometer new project, which officially entails the bringing in of 300,000 people, 3 lakh people to this island. One huge power plant. There is going to be a port, which is a 50,000 crore rupee port. There is an airport. Where will the water for all these requirements come? It's very unlikely that they will be able to meet the requirements of water for this entire establishment that's there. That is on one side with water. Two is, even if the water is available, where is it going to be disposed? What happens to the waste that is going to be created? Um, Keep in mind that the total Andaman and Nicobar Islands, of 600 islands today, have about 500,000 people as a population. And just about the same number of people, 3.5 lakh people, will be brought into just this one island. And Andaman and Nicobar Island today faces serious water problems. Port Blair, the capital town of the islands, the residents there don't get water on a regular basis in the taps in their houses. And the population is not as much as will be in Great Nicobar. So there are many aspects. There are actually also a number of legal aspects that need to be looked into. The potentially many violations of India's international commitments to biodiversity, to species, to human rights. So these are just two examples. Biodiversity, although we are talking about it, and water, but there are many others as well, as a matter of fact.
Yes, like you pointed out, Pankaj, the question of where water will come for all these people and the facilities. We're also talking about a huge range of tourism facilities, and the consumption of water as a tourist would be far greater than as an inhabitant. But that apart, there are also uh, there are also a lot of other worrying betrayals, I would like to call them, because technically we have a lot of these legal environmental rules and legislations, regulations in place to actually which show that there is no way such a project can come up under those legislations. For instance, two examples, and these are from the book too. And one of them is about how the port that is coming up in Galatia Bay, which is actually a nesting site for the leatherback turtle, giant leatherback turtle, that falls under CRZ 1A under the Island Coastal Regulation Zone notification of 2019. Now, these are strict no-go zones for any developmental activity. That's because the presence of coral reefs, the mangroves, nesting sites is one of the criteria. And your book points out that there have been at least 500 nesting incidents of leatherback turtles in the last 2-3 seasons from WII data. This data from the Wildlife Institute of India that your book quotes. So not just that, today I was just reading a letter that the former secretary to the government of India, Yes Sharma, has written to the government, saying that the projects actually violate 3 presidential regulations, including the Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Regulation of 1956. So according to these legislations, these projects should not be coming up at all. And of course, the issue of how corals have just disappeared from Galathea Bay, and this is being confirmed by two government institutes, the Zoological Survey of India and the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management. And But ironically, at the same time, the ZSI also says that around 16,000 coral colonies are going to be translocated in a bid to protect them. So, which means the corals are being affected. There are corals there. How are such blatant violations happening despite these legal safeguards?
I have no answer to that question, and you've pointed out many of them. And this is a serious problem with what is happening. So it's very clear, and through the examples that you also pointed out. Uh, so there is the environmental clearance that has been granted under the Environment Protection Act. Uh, all the boxes have been ticked on paper. So even if you look at the environment clearance conditions, they are laughable. They are unimplementable. So that is one aspect of the whole thing. The other, for instance, is one is not sure how the forest clearance, the stage one forest clearance under the FCA was granted, because the records, there are no records, and we've spoken about this, we've documented this. There are no records in terms of the agenda of the meetings where this was discussed, or indeed the minutes of the meetings where the Forest Advisory Committee actually gives forest clearance to the whole thing. Uh, there is also the matter of the Forest Rights Act and the tribal rights, which again has been written extensively. I have written more recently. There was a very detailed article by Chennai-based lawyer T. Mohan, on these aspects of how have these how has rights been settled, and how has permission been granted at the FRA. They constituted committees in which the representatives of the tribal communities were not there. They have not followed due process, but they've gone ahead and signed away the document. So we see again and again and again, actually on every single legal dimension, it is clear that there is a violation. And the case that you mentioned of the CRZ1A, Galathea Bay, and where the port is going to come up, is clearly CRZ1A. The 500 nestings that you're mentioning of the leatherbacks are happening every year for the last 3 or 4 years, from the records of the WII and the Andaman and Nicobar Forest Department. In 2022, there were more than 600 leatherback nestings on the beach in Galathea. So that's the maximum ever recorded since monitoring began in Galathea. So there are coral reefs there, there are mangroves there. The very fact, like you mentioned, that the environmental clearance condition says that 16,000 coral colonies should be relocated, in the first instance means that these coral colonies exist in this place. And if coral colonies exist, it is automatically CRZ1A as per Indian law, and a port cannot be allowed over here. So we are just seeing this, violation after violation after violation. And unfortunately, and it's happened just 3 days ago, and I'm sure this will come up, you might have had this mind, the NGT has also not accepted any of the questions that were raised in the challenge to the environmental clearance. And it actually, what has happened amounts to scientific fraud, because they're saying it is not CRZ1A when there is more than enough evidence of all the elements of a CRZ1, for example, and that's only one example, applying to the Galathea Bay. And I just mentioned one point which is very important to keep in mind, Aathira, is that the bay today, if you look at the map, has an opening of about 3 kilometers at its widest.
Okay.
So it is inside this bay that the port is going to be built, right? And it has certain good characteristics for a port construction. But for the port to work effectively, the mouth of the bay is going to be closed by a breakwater. So a 3 kilometer, this is from a design of the project proposal, a mouth opening which is 3 kilometers wide today, and this is what is being used by all these creatures that are living there, is going to be restricted to only 300 meters. The opening of the bay will come down by 90%. That is when it will stop being a CRZ1A, because then the bay will change ecological character completely. Turtles, it's almost impossible for these turtles to be able to then negotiate a 300-meter wide opening when there will be shipping, when there will be so much else happening. So uh, it is the construction of the port that will destroy this bay, destroy the ecological characteristics, and that is when it will become non-CRZ1A. But today it is clearly, there's no denying the fact, and it's extremely unfortunate that the NGT has completely ignored all the scientific evidence, uh, which is there for everybody to see, and just said that everything that the government has said is okay, and there are serious procedural improprieties in how the NGT went about doing this as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's something I wanted to talk about in detail. For our listeners, some background on Monday, on February 16th, the NGT refused to interfere with the environmental clearance that the Union Environment Ministry gave for these projects in 2022. Now, the NGT had also put together a high powered committee to look into some of these issues when petitions were raised in the NGT about this. And ironically, the conflict of interest that comes through, that's something that several people talk to me about too. And for instance, the members of the high powered committee are all uh, authorities, departments under the Union Environment Ministry, including the Wildlife Institute of India and its director, the secretary of the MOFCC, the directors of the ZSI and the BSI, the Botanical Survey of India, the Central Pollution Control Board, and a nominee of the Niti Aayog, which put together the project in the first place, and a nominee of the Ministry of Shipping, of all ministries. So, a lot of conflict of interest there. And but it also feels like it feels even more of a betrayal that the Union Environment Ministry and the National Green Tribunal, for instance, who are supposed to uphold and protect nature and the environment, are actually doing just the opposite. Did that come as a surprise to you, Pankaj?
No, not really, Athira, because you very nicely put out the whole conflict of interest in the constitution of the committees. So the the secretary, Andaman and Nicobar administration, who is the chair of the body that is going to implement the project, is on the committee. Like you said, Niti Aayog is on the committee. The Environment Ministry granted the clearance. Now the challenge is to this clearance, and who is on the committee who is going to evaluate the challenge? It is the Environment Ministry itself. So this is a mockery of process. This is, so I commit a crime or I do something, and then you ask me to decide whether I did the right thing or the wrong thing. I mean, obviously I'm going to say that I did the right thing. Now, in some senses, one was not very hopeful, one must be honest, but one was also hopeful that the NGT would take cognizance. The NGT, given its mandate, given the purpose for which it was created, so in that sense, it has been a very, very big letdown. Although in the balance, one would say that one was not surprised. Why is also one not surprised is because of what we discussed. The very fact that in spite of all these environmental and ecological values of this place, the Environment Ministry has given forest clearance and environmental clearance and is supporting the forest rights clearance or clearance under the Forest Rights Act, itself shows that the ministry is not taking on the responsibility that it is supposed to take on. Uh, you should look at the environment impact assessment report, which is the basis of the environmental clearance. It is a laughable report. It has not
Absolutely.
actually been analyzed to the extent it should have been. But there are so many problems with that. The ministry and its committees found no problem with that. You should read the environmental clearance conditions, which won't make sense even from simple science. They talk about trees that are exceptionally tall and old should be protected. Now, what kind of science will tell you what is an exceptionally tall or an exceptionally old tree? What does it mean? So the very fact that the Environment Ministry and its committees have kind of abdicated their responsibility, that they actually, and I think you've written about it, you're aware of that. Before the project proposal came into the public domain, the Environment Ministry denotified the wildlife sanctuary in Galathea Bay. Galathea Bay was in 1997 declared a wildlife sanctuary because there are leatherback turtles. There are three other species of turtles that nest there. There are corals. There are endemic species like the Nicobari megapode that are found there. So there was a reason why it was declared a wildlife sanctuary. And nothing has changed on the ground. No material or ecological reality has changed. But in January of 2021, they just denotified the sanctuary. So because otherwise you can't place the port over there, which is why they are also changing the category from CRZ1A, because otherwise the port cannot be allowed there. So the ministry is simply not doing what it's supposed to do. It's just gone ahead and done exactly what they should not have been doing. So in that sense, one was not hoping much from the NGT process, but considering it's a judicial body and considering it's an independent body, one was hoping that at least something would happen through it. But both in terms of the constitution of the committees, like you pointed out, and what they have finally said, it's been very, very disappointing. It's completely, it's a spectacular failure of the NGT to meet the mandate for what it was created.
Right. Right. In fact, we did write about the EIA in January 2022, just after it was published in December. And
Yeah.
I remember how scientists pointed out that a single season study will not capture the impacts that these projects will cause on the biodiversity. And the
Absolutely.
social assessment hadn't even been done at that time.
Yeah.
So apart from that, though, Pankaj, one of
Yeah.
the other reasons that people say that the people are pushing forward the project is that there's this defense and strategic point of view, and that it is extremely important for India from that standpoint. Now, one of the issues here is that in they say that it is a defense project, but the thing is, the transshipment container terminal, the power plant, the township, the airport, out of these, only the airport is going to be partly managed for defense purposes. So do these arguments hold, and can we make do with maybe a lesser project that is not so extensive on the island, to still maintain our defense and strategic issues?
So I think you've answered that question, Aathira, because what component of this project is defense? There is, except for this dual purpose airport. And when the project was proposed in 2021, that Niti Aayog commissioned report by AECOM India Limited, in that even the airport was not a dual purpose airport. It was a commercial airport, international airport it was going to be. So the entire conceptualization of this project, and if you look at the executive summary of the AECOM report, which I was doing only today, which is the basis of this entire proposal, there is not one word about the strategic or the defense dimension of this project. This is not to say that this place is not defense or this, it may not be strategic, but it is not part of the proposal at all. It is not part of the proposal at all. Uh, 50,000 crores to be invested for what is clearly a transshipment terminal, which is a commercial operation. 130 square kilometers of a township with tourism facilities. There is a contradiction between saying this is going to be strategically and defense and then inviting 400,000 people from outside and asking them to come and settle over here. What the defense strategy should be, who should invest, whether we need a big project or a small project, whether it is needed at all, even from a strategic perspective, is not something that I can comment on. So there are two aspects that really one can say. One is the project conceptualization and the components of the project. There is nothing about it that is defense or strategic. Where the even the economic dimension of that is under serious question. So if one says that there is economic strategy involved there, then whether, because based on transshipment, and there are people far more experienced with these matters, both in logistics and finance and economics, including in our volume, a fantastic essay by Rajshekhar,
Rajshekhar, yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, who puts it out very simply and very comprehensively that economically this will not make sense, because what you're going to invest and what you're going to get in terms of returns with tariffs and the cargo that will come in, it will simply not cover your costs. So that is also not going to happen. Where the defense itself is concerned, a commercial port, a tourism township, how is it defense? And some of the leading defense, ex-defense people, including former admiral of the Indian Navy, uh, other analysts like the gentleman Abhishek Singh, who's written about this thing, and other people who have been in the defense, have said that this is not what is required for a strategic perspective. Now, what I'm saying also is, yes, there is an opinion that it is important, and there are other opinions that it is important from a strategic perspective, but there are opinions within the defense or the ex-defense establishment publicly available which say that this is not best strategically. So even there is a difference of opinion. And then what component of this project is actually defense? And very important to keep in mind also, which we've not discussed at all, is that this is a deeply, you mentioned this, is a deeply seismically active and volatile zone. We have, if you know what happened in 2004 when the tsunami happened, the lighthouse of Indira Point, which is on the cover of our book, the earlier book, the Great Nicobar Betrayal, in which you yourself have a chapter that contributed. Yeah, the lighthouse of Indira Point stands not above the high tide line, but is surrounded by waters of the Andaman Sea, because that land saw subsidence when the earthquake happened, subsidence of 15 feet. So this is a very volatile landscape in which creating infrastructure of this kind is actually increasing vulnerability. You are going to put at risk the money that you've invested, the infrastructure that you will create, and imagine you're bringing in 300,000 people to one of the world's most seismically active zones. Who will take responsibility of their lives and their losses if something happens? So all this put together, it does not make sense. I mean, from an ecological and tribal rights perspective, for a moment, let's leave that aside. But from an economic and a defense perspective, nothing in the project suggests that it is actually either of the two are going to work out.
Got it. Now, Pankaj, you have spent a lot of time on the islands and also interacting with the people there. And is there any particular aspect of these impacts that reaches out, like in terms of how it would, affect the people there? Is there something that comes to mind that's very heart wrenching to you as somebody who has spent so much time there?
See, Great Nicobar is unique in just so many ways, Aathira. It's a large island. It's 920 odd square kilometers, but the total population there today is only 5,000 people, of which, like you mentioned in the beginning, 1,000 people are the indigenous communities, whom I have personally never interacted with. But you can imagine and kind of speculate, and perhaps even more than speculate, what will happen to these people. Now you just see this 1,000 people, which are tribal community people, and in a total population of about 6,000 today. So it's a ratio of one indigenous member to about, say, 6 people from the outside. Just this ratio, imagine it will change by almost like 3-4,000%. So for every Champagne and Nicobari in the island, there will then be uh, thousands of outsiders who have just come in and swamped that island. So they will bring with them disease, they will bring with them takeaway of land, of culture. So and we've seen this in many parts of the world when outsiders come into tribal landscapes, ecologies, culture, language, health, everything gets devastated. We've seen that in some ways even in the Andaman Islands. And there is no doubt that that will happen in the Nicobars also. What chance does a community of 300 people have? The Champagne are probably not more than 300 people who've lived here for thousands of years. We may not know about their land or their language or their culture, but they have the fundamental right of being there. They have constitutional guarantees. And when you bring in 300,000 people into that landscape, there is no way that these people are going to get restricted to what you say is where they should be. They are going to go into the forests. They will go out of interest. They will go out of need for resources, for fun. They will go and interact with the tribal community. And it would be absolutely devastating. That is one. Two is, like we've discussed quite extensively, is the impact on the biodiversity. Galathea Bay, with, with an average 600 leatherback nestings every year, is one of India's most important turtle nesting site. It is listed in the Marine National Turtle Action Plan of 2021 as one of India's most important nesting sites. It is perhaps the northern Indian Ocean's most important leatherback nesting site. Now it will be completely destroyed. That bay will be closed. The ecology will change, and it is actually heart wrenching. It's just to think about that we would have destroyed uh, an ancient site, an ancient creature, their nesting sites. What will happen to the forest there? These are some of the most magnificent forests that you will ever see. Never been logged. Only a small portion has been given over to settlers. This is rich in biodiversity that we don't know about. There are endemic creatures like the Nicobari tree shrew, like the Nicobari megapode. So much is there that we don't know. All of this will be gone and can never come back. So, and what for? Uh, it is not going to be economically viable. I don't think it's going to be of any defense and strategic value. So these two things certainly one feels very bad about. What happened to those local people and what happens to that biodiversity, which is unique, irreplaceable, priceless. So many things to be very sad about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the reasons, though, to brush all that aside, has been the use of national importance as a term to actually also withhold information, including in RTIs, in the parliament, for instance. There's been barely any information about this that is available from the union government. Is this warranted, and what are the issues that these things cause?
Yeah, so it's completely bizarre because on the one hand, we are saying this is a commercial port. On the other hand, we are denying information for strategic reasons. Uh, and national importance, uh, this is a place unlike anywhere in the world. I mean, Great Nicobar and some of what is there on Great Nicobar is not found anywhere else. How can, I mean, this is as nationally important as anything else. Uh, you can't replace that coastline. You can't replace those creatures. So it is quite inexplicable why information is not being given, why it is not being provided, and it's I think it's in the larger climate today also. Unfortunately, that there's this lack of transparency. Uh, but one thing that we've done, and I mean, I might just add here, and lots of people have used that resource. One of the things that we managed to do over the years is to put all this information together in creating a very detailed timeline. So, one of our lessons in terms of following this project is to constantly keep a track and to archive all the material that is there. Because unfortunately, like you say, a lot of the material is not available from the sources that should provide the information. Just 10 days ago, there was a law student from Bangalore who wrote in saying, I'm looking for these documents, but they are not there on the website of the ministry and the relevant authorities. Do you have access to that document? Now, why should that document not be easily available is the first question. And why it should be denied, why should RTIs be denied is something that is uh, completely unacceptable, not at all acceptable, because this is the right of all of us as citizens to know what's happening, and this is a purely commercial project. It's not even that there's anything to be hidden over there. So just completely beats me as to why that would be the case.
Right, right. And now with the NGT closing its doors to petitions and things like that about the Great Nicobar projects, uh, is there still hope? Do you think? I know there are more cases being heard. Like, for instance, I think in the Kolkata High Court, the case against the violation regarding the FRA, Forest Rights Act, is being heard. Also, it's underway. But what what do you see happening? What are the possible futures we are looking at? Are we looking at seeing the project implemented entirely, or maybe hopefully shelved? We don't know. So, is there any hope at all?
There is a lot of hope. The NGT order, like I said, was expected, but still was very heartbreaking. It was very disappointing. Um, but what's been also very interesting, Athira, if you look at just in the last 3 days, how much media attention has come to this project because of the NGT order. And while there has been support and argument saying that, oh, this is good and finally the project is getting clearance, across the board, across media houses, across news channels like Wire, like so many people have questioned and raised questions about the clearance, saying it is not being done fairly. And I have myself been surprised at the kind of questioning that has happened. So there clearly is an awareness out there in the media, in the people, and people are concerned about this. People are recognizing that there's something that's not right. And at another level, if you see what happened when the Aravali definitions were being changed and the kind of public concern that came up, it may not come up for the Nicobar because it's too far away, but it shows to me that there is a larger concern. We're living in a world which is, air quality, water, environment, and the concerns about the Nicobar are now quite well known. Um,
Yeah.
so, if the NGT order had been positive, that would have been very welcome. But that it is not. Uh, like you said, there are matters in the Calcutta High Court. We are hopeful that there, people will see the point of the questions being raised, and there is this awareness among people. There is a lot of social media. There's a lot of research happening, a lot of writing happening. So that is what gives hope. I've been saying this for a while. I think eventually, even people implementing it and promoting the project, I think will realize that it is not worth it. And the one thing to keep in mind also is that, unlike in many other cases, see, work has not started on the ground. So the argument that we will lose our investment, we will if we stop now, so much money that has been invested will go down the drain. That's not going to happen. What's only happened so far is all the environmental and other clearances have come. So
Right.
we still have time to stop it and to not lose anything, as a matter of fact. So all this put together, I think the growing awareness, the growing discussions about it, and the realization that this is not going to make sense. I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that uh, things will turn for the better.
Okay. Thank you. And on that hopeful note, thank you for speaking with us, Pankaj. And to our listeners, please do go grab your copy of Island on Edge and read about all this in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ad. Thank you so much.